We are back for turn 26. Up to July 3rd, 1915 now. The Mid-Eastern Front, the British are going to start trying to move in against the Turks. As you can see, the Turks are still a little bit stronger than the British, but the British have better firepower. Make a little bit of a dent in the Turks, but not too much at this point. Still a long way to go to Jerusalem. This is some action in the Mediterranean subs. You'll see I've got that the Central Powers have some submarines now in action in the Mediterranean. Those are taking a pretty good toll on the Entente's Mediterranean shipping lanes. Here we have the Italians who have weakened this garrison at Trento already. They're making short work of that garrison unit now. With that, the Italians have made their first gain at Trento. Obviously, the Austrians are going to have to bring some corps to really shore this defense up, and they're going to need to do it quick while they have time. If somewhere like Innsbruck falls, it's going to be real bad news for the Austrians and Germans. Alright, over on the Serbian front, the Serbs are still going to be falling back. Basically, we're in protect niche mode. Here the Russians are going to make some counterattacks while the Germans haven't had a chance to dig in just yet. Russians still have some teeth left at this point. Don't quite manage to destroy that German corps, but they do a good bit of damage in the process. Otherwise, we're just shoring up our defensive line. One of the things the Russians run into is they have so many units. It's difficult to keep everybody up to strength all the time because the cost can be prohibitive. Here we have the Russians again trying to attack Przemysl. And because it's a fortress and we don't have level 1 artillery, we're not really making much dent in the entrenchments of this fortress, but we are trying to just weaken the morale of the garrison. If we can get it weak enough, we can maybe still be able to do a full-on attack. Russians still banging up the Austrians pretty good. As you can see, the Austrians have a pretty tough time with the Russians, so if the Germans don't come to their assistance in 1915, it can be a real bad news for the Austrians. It's a pretty historical result. Here we have fighting in the air over the Western Front. In this game, the Germans and the French stayed pretty on par with their air power. Nobody's ever really established dominance one way or the other. This is the East Prussian front, where we're having to start considering what happens whenever Hindenburg breaks through. As you can see, Hindenburg's army is still in very good shape. Back in the North Atlantic, or in the Atlantic, we have some action going on. British trying to drive off all these submarines. Germans had a somewhat successful 1915 campaign. but their subs really just aren't quite up to the tech level they need to be yet. So here the British managed to destroy a submarine unit, which gives them 200 national morale bonus. And that wraps up our replay for the turn. So you can see things are getting pretty hot across the front. Still not a whole lot of action in the western front yet. Here you'll see where the Mediterranean convoys are having some disruption, although that's not a huge amount of money at this point. German surrender in Southwest Africa. That's just a off-map event. Alright, here we have a decision to make. We're going to pay this. This is going to help Switzerland move towards the Central Powers a little. Probably won't ultimately make a difference, but you never know. You see we got 2 heavy artillery units that are coming in. These are going to get deployed on the eastern front against Russia. Von Hutier will also get deployed on the eastern front. That wraps up our turn. If we look over here on the eastern front, you'll see Germany's got some artillery that's not really in range yet of the main Russian forces, but we're getting close now. So we're going to be driving on Warsaw pretty hard here soon. Von Hutier is going to take over to this Breslau sector so that these guys are a little bit better armed. We'll be driving in real heavily from this direction. One of those artillery units is going to get deployed up here with Hindenburg's forces. Once we have that in place, we should be able to drive on Kovno, then Vilna, and from Vilna we're probably going to go either towards Minsk or towards Minsk. Most likely Minsk. If we can cut Minsk off, we've cut the rail lines that the Russians have leading up to the north. We could potentially pocket this unit down to the south. If I had the firepower, which I don't, to drive up from Galicia, we could possibly even cut off at Kovel and threaten them with encirclement, which is what historically happened. However, rather than deploying the units in Galicia that the Germans historically did, deployed them down in Serbia instead. Speaking of which, let's just take a quick look at the Serbian front. As you can see, my artillery is still pretty far behind, so I'm going to have to spend a couple of turns moving that up forwards towards Niš. But once that artillery arrives, we should be in real good shape to start pounding away at Niš. And once it falls, Bulgaria should be a shoe-in for coming in. As you can see, Bulgaria is already up to 75%. And falling Niš should bring them all the way up to 100%. And at that point, Serbia's days should absolutely be numbered. But that's basically what you'll see. I think what you're going to see here, the difference between this historical is that we're going to have Serbia fall slightly early, but the Russians hang in a little bit longer and do a little bit more damage. We'll see how it plays out. That wraps up my update for this turn. Stay tuned for the next one.